What's up, guys? I'm Fowler. Today we're going to be breaking down my track Numb with Che'nelle. This was my first song on Monstercat back in 2018, and I haven't had the project open in quite a while, so you and I are going to walk through this and figure out what makes it tick. Let's go. Okay, so first of all, we've got kind of this big opening pad, which is a Paul stretched version of the vocals. And it's going through this reactor ensemble that I love. This one's called, I think it's just called VHS. And it gives it that wow and flutter, the kind of unstable part. Okay, it's also being low passed and going through Valhalla Shimmer, which is it's a pitch shift kind of reverb. If we take all of the effects off, it's just the Paul stretch version of the vocal, which is cool, but the effects is what gives it that kind of like epic kind of vibe. Okay, so that leads us into the intro.
Never stop calling me crazy, but you the one that's fucking crazy.
These vocals were already fairly produced when I got them, so if we take all the effects off.
Calling me crazy, but you the one that's fucking crazy. And it's time.
Okay, so I didn't record these vocals. In fact, this was supposed to be a remix of an actual song that never happened, so this became the original. Now, you can hear the sub bass from probably the room next to the vocal booth from them monitoring it in the original take if I take the high pass off.
Calling me crazy, but you.
So for effects, obviously high passed. Went through some multi-band compression.
Calling me crazy.
Went through just straight up compression. Just a touch though in that, because it was already fairly compressed. So I think I was just trying to get a little more volume out of it. It's getting de-essed.
Calling me crazy, but
so this is one of my favorite de-essers. It's Pro DS, and I love it because it gives you such good like visual feedback. And that's something I think that is quite important with plugins and effects, is if it doesn't have good visuals, if it doesn't show you, demonstrate what you're doing, it's kind of hard to just trust your ears. Sometimes it's nice to have like that visual confirmation that, ooh, yes, it is just catching those S's and that's it.
Calling me crazy.
So it goes through this EQ and this reverb, but they're automated off right now. I think that's probably just for the build over here. Yeah. And then a little bit of reverb, and that's it, except when it gets automated. This automation clip down here is sending it to a track with H delay on it.
I will stick around for you
which is where that kind of delay is coming from. So I have the delay on its own channel, and what I'm doing is I'm just automating the send to it. So
I will stick around for you
that way it just delays the phrase that I send to it, and it doesn't delay all the stuff that comes before it. So that's basically the vocals. I mean, she's an amazing vocalist. She did a great job. They came already produced, tuned. Everything was like I just plug and play. It was incredible. Okay, so we got a kick. It's from Leviathan. I think Black Octopus makes that. It's a great sounding kick. It's in F sharp. It's in the right key of the song. We got our side chaining underneath, which all of our tracks are ducking to. All of the tracks that I want side chained are now ducking to that. Let's see, what else we got? A reverse snare to like lead into the... So this reverse snare is almost like a call and response with this reverse snare. So we got quite a few snares on top of each other. Now I'm wondering how I approach that. So these snares, they're all on top of each other, but they're all kind of doing a different thing. They're adding their piece to the pie. So let's listen to, first of all, this clap is really, it's just there as a pre-clap. Like you can see how it's shifted over right before the snare hits, and that just helps. It helps differentiate the sound of the snare from the transient of the kick. So you got the click of the kick, you got the snap of the snare, and if you put a little pre-shifted clap or snare sound before it, it helps the snare kind of cut through on top of the kick. Now this is kind of the main snare sound, I would say. That's like the main, that's when you listen to the snare, that's kind of what you hear, right? This is super wide, and it's very like, it sounds like time stretched or something. It is time stretched. It has a lot of character. It has barely any punch, right? Like if we get rid of the kick, it's almost just like a weird noise that's wide and has character to it. So that's adding width and character without getting in the way of the snap of this glitch hop snare. And then last but not least, we got this guy. That's like that lo-fi kind of drum machine snare. That's more character. So when you add them all together, it's also adding a lot of the low tone, like the bassy tone to it. So those are the snares. Okay, let's move on. See, the drums are very basic in the first drop. It's really like, it's more about the bass chugs, and the drums are there for the driving force, but like there's not a lot of top drums, not a lot of percussion, just little zips and zaps like this guy here. That little whip. I'm gonna turn the vocals off. So halfway through this drop, we have the pickup of energy, which happens mostly because of the hi-hats. That kind of like give more momentum to it, but also we've got this like interesting tony kind of this thing. Right? So it comes in every other clap. So again, thinking call and response, we've got this thing, okay, on one clap, and then on the other clap, we've got that reverse, wherever it is, right here. And then another response, we got the call. And then, so the call is right here. And then the other response is. So once you start listening to any music you love, your favorite artist, you start breaking down their songs, you realize that call and response is a massive part of the songwriting process. There's a question being asked, and then there's an answer, but that answer didn't answer everything, so there's a follow-up question, and then maybe there's an answer that answers everything that came before it, but then maybe that whole section is a question in itself, and then the next section is made up of calls and responses, but itself is a response to the first section. And once you start analyzing music like that, you'll realize that like everything is call and response, whether it's percussive sounds, whether it's lyrics, you know, bass wubs, melody, maybe the melody, da-da-da-da-da, it's asking a question, da-da-da-da-da, it answers it. Everything is call and response, and it goes back to music being like a conversation. Anyway, that's something to keep in mind, and if you start listening to, especially the song, listen to the song, I'll point out some more call and response moments. So let's move on. So we've got the first part of the drop. Here's a prime example. Let's listen to this. Let's listen to the vocal. All of my life away. That's the call, right? Then the response is every single day. I mean, it's very clear. It's very obvious. That's how it works, guys. Okay, so now that we've covered the vocals and the drums, let's take a look at some of these bass sounds that are happening in the drop. All this is a sine wave with a bit of an attack to it, and this volume knob is being automated, I think, to give it that chuggy feel that the other bass has. Now it's going through a low pass filter because I find that there's probably some clicks and kind of noise artifacts. Let's turn it off. Yeah, especially from the automation of that knob, we're getting some clicks. So that low pass filter is just to get rid of those clicks and noises. And then it's going through this wave shaper to give it some meat or some connective tissue. If we look at a spectrum after the wave shaper, let's look at it with the wave shaper off. You can see mostly just here. Let's turn the wave shaper on. You can see it's got that second harmonic, but it also has some character leading quite a ways up in the spectrum. So that's a sub bass. Here is one of the main basses with a lot of automation. So here's kind of an FL Studio hot tip for organizing your wubs. So I have this MIDI clip that's playing the bass sound, and then I have all these automation clips that control that bass synth, which is Harmor. What I do, and what I think works really well, is if you click on the bottom of a track to resize it, if you drag up and then keep going, it links it to the track above it. Then if you hold Shift and scroll with your mouse over the track, it moves everything with it. Right? So it keeps it all together, and it tells me, okay, I want to listen to just this sound. Instead of like trying to find all the automation clips all over the project, I know that if I want to play this sound and I want to hear all the automation, I have to turn on all these tracks that have been connected to the MIDI clip. Okay, let's see what this is doing. Again, I haven't looked at this in years, so I'm just going to try and like figure out my train of thought when creating this bass sound. So it seems pretty simple. I mean, oh, there's a lot of stuff in the mixer. Let's turn all the effects off. Yeah, so most of the sound is coming from the effects. Because, I mean, this is basically a very simple super saw pluck kind of sound. It's got some unison, 3 voices, detuned. I'm using the low pass filter to give it the plucky sound, which is being automated by this guy right here. But what are we going through here? Okay, we're going through a balancer. Okay, so the Fruity Balancer, the volume on it is linked to that low pass filter automation clip to give it more of a chug, I guess. Then it's going through Homicide. Let's turn that off. It's not doing a whole lot, but it is adding some dirt. Moving on, we got a high pass to make room for the sub bass, of course. Going through OTT, of course. Without that, the ability that OTT has to reach down into the lower amplitude of, like, if you filtered something down, you've removed a bunch of high frequency stuff, it can just go down and like reclaim it and bring it back up. And it's like, hey, you dropped this. And you're like, no, I just did a 64 dB per octave low pass. What the hell? Sorry, that was like a super nerdy moment. Okay, going through some room reverb. Going through a bit of distortion after the room reverb. This is a filter that gets automated on, I believe, for the build-up. Yeah. So it's a bandpass filter that I'm opening up as we get closer to the drop, and then I'm turning off the EQ when it gets to the drop to get the full sound. Okay, then it's going through another EQ. Just this is more of like a shaping EQ to give it some brightness and, I don't know, maybe cut out a bit of mud. I use this quite a bit, actually, the transient processor. Oh, I'm actually using that. This is interesting. I'm like learning from myself in the past. It sounds like I'm using this transient processor in order to have the room reverb trail off quicker. So it's like grabbing the room reverb and turning it down. Because if you listen carefully with it off, and then you listen to it with it on, it's making the whole thing tighter by pulling down the volume after the transient happens. So that's cool. And then last but not least, a little bit of compression. It's like I'm making it super plucky and transient-y, and then I'm trying to reduce the pluckiness and the transient-ness after the fact to control it, to make it a little easier to mix. Okay, so that's cool. Okay, that's I would call that the main bass sound. When you hear numb and you hear the drop, that's kind of what you hear, right? Now, everything else I'm gonna say is just there to help a certain part of that. So let's listen to this next one. Again, like that's just, you can barely hear that. It's kind of adding like a knockiness to the start. Like you have like different kinds of transients. You have like snappy transients, like a real sharp, like a quick transient. And then you have maybe like a knocky, you know, it has a bit more length to it. And I think that's what I was doing. It's very subtle though. That's very subtle. This looks like a turnaround bass, like an accent. Let's hear it. Ah, okay, that's like a response to one of the calls. Okay, cool, let's check that out. Okay, it's going to the same channel through all those effects that we looked at. Let's hear it without those effects. So that's kind of cool. So with this wub, it has a bit of a tail, and because we're automating the volume or the gain after that tail, that's why we get the bwa-da-da, that third bwa-da-da, that's coming from this balancer going back up to full volume, and I've stopped it from coming back down by just going that. That's cool. All right. Oh, yeah, let's look at that synth. Fowler does rhythm too, okay? A lot of the sound's coming from this phaser. And the rest is just some cool wavetables with like bends, I guess, happening. It's pretty straightforward, kind of wavetabley kind of synth. I think most of the character, like I said, is coming from the flanger. That's actually it for basses for that first part. It's very simple. It's just a pluck with a few calls and responses. So that kind of covers the first part of the first drop. Now we have this kind of pseudo breakdown section that breaks down to let the vocals come back up and do their thing before going into the second drop. So let's check that out. Okay, so we got a few things happening. Let's mute the vocals again because we've gone over them and they're on top of everything. So if we want to listen to the stuff underneath them, let's just mute them for a sec. So we have some filtered down drum beats. I think these are drum and bass drum beats. Yeah. All right, and as we get closer to the drop, obviously that filter's gonna open up. Okay. We've got this big 808 kind of. Woo! There's some cool stuff in there. And you know why? Because I forgot to turn the HQ button on. If I turn these on, it's going through two wave shapers. And let's listen to just that track. And now let's listen to it with the HQ off. So in this situation, I'm glad that I forgot to turn that on because it adds most of the character to that sound. It's got that crispiness and that interesting character towards the end of the tail. If I were to do this again, I probably wouldn't have this cymbal here. It seems kind of random. It's like it's leading up to something, but there's nothing there. In fact, I probably would have taken out all of those reverse cymbals. It kind of sounds like it got carried over from the previous section, but because I'm a professional, I'm going to say I did it on purpose. Let's see what this guy is. Oh, this is a massive patch that I made. It's just got some cool wave tables going through a low pass, nothing too serious. Okay, it's getting low passed up. Let's listen to what else is layered there with it. Melody Orchestra from Contact, going through low pass, again, being low passed up. Okay, we also have these chords. Pretty basic plucky kind of thing. So this is kind of like a cool little, it's chords, but it's almost like a counter melody. And that is Harmer. It's almost like you can do a normal supersaw in Harmer, but then it sounds like a Harmer supersaw. Like, it's crazy. Harmer is such a good synth and I love it. So that synth really comes in handy towards the main, like the main breakdown of the song here, where we start moving around with the chords. If we listen to like... Going back to the first breakdown where we were, we've got that stuff. We got a ton of effects and swooshes and explosions. So one thing I like to do with effects to make my stuff sound unique or sound like my effects is not rely simply on, you know, Cymatics Impact number 69 or like, you know, Leviathan Impact Flatline. Like, yes, those sound great and have a lot of interesting character to them and they're very useful, but you gotta layer them in a way that nobody else has layered them. And the way that I do that is not only do I use multiple layers to create more interesting sounds, but I create effects with synthesizers that I make from scratch, so I know this has got my sound baked into it. I'm not just kind of regurgitating this Impact sound from the sample pack I bought. And again, sample packs are great. Impact sounds are great, effects are great, but if you just use them out of the box, there's a good chance that somebody else used them out of the box, and there's a good chance that 100 other people use them out of the box, and now you don't really have your unique brand anymore. So it's always good to try and figure out ways of injecting as much of you into even the mundane parts of a track like effects, because a lot of people hate doing effects. I find it not that exciting, to be honest. It's kind of the work part of the song, but it's a very, very, very important part of the song, so don't skimp out. So I've created... So this is interesting. This macro, which is the main modulation, what's the only modulation that's happening as we're getting closer to the drop. There's two oscillators. This one's going up 2 octaves, and oscillator 2 is going up 1 octave. So that means that as I go up through the automation, they're going to get really out of tune with each other, but as they get closer to the top, they're going to become closer to an octave apart. So as they start off, they're in tune. Now this massive noise looks like it's probably a similar thing, but just going in the opposite direction. Let's listen to just that. Okay. Cool. So mostly just the white noise. We got a little bit of sawtooths that are detuned from each other, and it's going through a high pass. It's not rocket science, but when you add all those things together, now we have a complex sound that I guarantee you nobody else has put these sounds together and then designed that same thing in massive, you know, like once you start adding multiple layers like this, the uniqueness and the character really starts to build up. Oh, here's another one. Almost sounds like the THX or whatever that was back in the 80s. And again, I'm relying on more sample pack effects, but they're just there to help. They're there as a tool. They're there as a utility almost. A lot of the characters coming from the synths and the sound design that I did makes it sound like something I've made, even though I've used 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sample pack impacts, 7. I mean, honestly, there's probably like many. It's more than the sum of their parts, I guess is what I'm trying to say. All right, so that's the effects building up. Now we're into the second drop. Let's check it out. So the biggest thing that picks up steam or picks up the momentum of the second drop is just straight up that ride cymbal. So this is something I think that I have to thank my friend Jello for, because in the techno world, you might be waiting 3 minutes just to get a hi-hat on the upbeat. And then when you get that hi-hat, you're losing your mind because you're like, oh my God, I needed that hi-hat, right? That kind of importance on something as simple as like a ride cymbal or a hi-hat, that's something that I keep in mind all the time. And if you take away that ride cymbal, yes, there is some new synth things being played, but it doesn't have the same energy as... Like that's really moving along with that, just a simple ride on the upbeat. Okay, so I know I sound like a broken record, but call and response. Let's check this out. So we got call, response, call, so you can see that we're going call, response, call, response. And then this, that's a call. And this, that's a response. All right. And now this whole thing that we just listened to, that's a call. And this is a response. Now the bass sounds are just getting more filled out. There's less starty, stoppy bits. There's less like dun dun dun. It's more dun 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 dun. And that's building up momentum again because now we're filling in all of those eighth note spots. Now we have a chord come in, which is like this like jazzy. She's a jazzy chord that I made in Razor, which I haven't used much lately, but I love this synth. I should use it more often. It sounds like it is a minor 7th chord. Yeah. We have the minor 7th chord come in during halfway through that drop, and we also have and then back to the response. Bringing this super saw part in, this guy, halfway through that second drop is almost like introducing it for the breakdown. And again, I've got the vocals muted, so let's turn those on. Again, we got some call and response in the vocals. Let's go check that out real quick. So we got, I go numb, I go numb, bass sound. I go numb, and then this extended is an answer to the whole thing. I mean, I I should just shut up about call and response. I feel like you guys get it. Okay, so now we're into the breakdown. Let's check that out. Obviously, we got this super saw that I was talking about. But we also have... Okay, we got an omnisphere here. What's it playing? Gorgeous analog. Oh, and you can't forget the saw. It's almost like a trancey section with that high string sound being played. Okay, we also have, let's go halfway through the breakdown. Ooh, what is this thing? So this is kind of cool. This is like, I didn't even know this was here, to be honest. I forgot. So if you listen to that in the track. So sometimes, to a fault, I love layering little interesting stuff that you have to listen to it 100 times or like have somebody point it out to you and you're like, oh my God, I didn't realize that was in there. And this is one of those things. It's a super, super subtle element, right? But it kind of rewards the listener for paying attention and for like listening more than one time. And now you'll never be able to unhear that. Okay, that builds us up to the last drop. Don't remember at all how I made these sounds, so let's dig in. First of all, that's kind of like the most... Oh, interesting. Cool. So this is a sound I can kind of remember now. I just basically go into FM8 and I like mash keys, play with knobs, like basically mess around and record it, and then I can drop them into Harmor and like play around with these settings and find interesting moments that happen in that recording session of me messing around with FM8. That's how that sound came to be. Okay, then we got the sub bass here. And we've got the chug, 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 chug. All right, what's the, okay. For the final response here, that's that 808 going through those two distortions, but one is tuned up an octave. And just getting absolutely reamed by that distortion. Now that again is just, that's just playing through different parts of that FM8 sweep that I made. Okay, then we bring back the chords for the second half of the last drop. Another really super subtle thing that you probably would never notice. Like it's almost hilarious. outro is just a switch up, goes to full drum and bass for a little teaser there at the end. But besides that, all the sounds are the same. It just goes to a full drum and bass tempo rather than the mid-tempo halftime stuff. So I think the magic in this track is really the vocals primarily, but then a close second is the sound design on that chuggy bass. I mean, when you think of Numb, first of all, you think of But You're the One That's Fucking Crazy, and then you think of jump 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 jump, like the jump jumps, the jump jump basses. If you want to dig a little deeper into this, or even any of my other songs, I upload all of the stems to all of my songs when I release them on my Discord server. There's a link in the description below. Come join the community of strange weirdos and have some fun and maybe learn a thing or two. If you like this kind of content, be sure to let me know. Hit that like button, maybe drop a comment. If you have any questions, I'll be sure to answer them as soon as I can. So until next time, bye!